The massive ship called Times New Horizon Times moved slowly through space toward a distant star. Inside, 50,000 humans slept in special chambers, dreaming of their new home on a planet far from Earth. They had been traveling for 12 years, and their journey was almost over. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge, looking at the blue and green planet that would soon be their new world. She had spent most of her adult life planning this moment. These people trusted her to lead them safely to their new home. "Commander," called Lieutenant Park from his station. "We're getting strange readings. There are ships coming toward us." Sarah walked over to look at the screen. Several large, dark ships were moving in their direction. They looked nothing like human ships. These vessels were long and sharp, like metal spears cutting through space. "First contact," Sarah said quietly. This was the moment humans had wondered about for centuries. "Are they trying to talk to us?" "Yes, ma'am. They're sending a signal." On the main screen, a face appeared that was clearly not human. The creature had gray skin, 4 eyes, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. It wore a military uniform covered in strange symbols. "Unknown vessel," the alien said in perfect English. "I am Admiral Vex Tar of the Zephyrian Hegemony. You have entered our space without permission." Sarah stepped forward. "I'm Commander Sarah Chen of the human colony ship Times New Horizon **. We come in peace. We didn't know this space belonged to anyone. We're just looking for a new home." Admiral Vex Tar's 4 eyes studied her with cold interest. Behind him, other aliens moved around what looked like a military command center. Everything about their ship screamed of war and power. "Humans," Vex Tar said the word like it tasted bad. "Another primitive species crawling into space with their simple machines. Your ship uses fusion power and basic weapons. Your shields are weak. Your technology is hundreds of years behind ours." Sarah kept her voice calm and friendly. "We'd be happy to share what we know and learn from you. Perhaps we can help each other." Several aliens behind Vex Tar made harsh laughing sounds. The Admiral's expression grew even colder. "Help us." Vex Tar leaned forward. "Little human. Do you know how many species the hegemony has conquered? Do you know how many worlds bow before our power?" "No," Sarah said honestly. "But we don't want to fight. We just want to live peacefully on that planet. There's plenty of room for everyone." Vex Tar's laugh was like broken glass. "Peaceful. They always say that. Your species will learn the same lesson all the others learned. The strong rule, the weak serve." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, but she kept trying. "Admiral, surely there's no need for conflict. We're just one ship with families and children. We're not a threat to your empire." "Children," Vex Tar repeated. "Good. Young ones learn faster." He turned to someone off-screen. "Battle stations. Charge the main cannon." Sarah's heart began to race. "Admiral, please. We have 50,000 people on this ship. Mothers, fathers, children who just want a chance at a new life. We're not soldiers. We're farmers and teachers and doctors. And now you are examples," Vex Tar said. "Your death will teach other humans their place in this galaxy." The aliens on his bridge moved quickly around their stations. Warning lights flashed red on their ship. Sarah could see weapons beginning to glow with deadly energy. "This message will be sent to your homeworld," Vex Tar continued. "They will see what happens to species that dare enter hegemony space without permission. Perhaps your leaders will be smarter than you." Sarah looked around her own bridge. Her crew stared back at her with fear and desperation. These were good people, scientists and engineers who had given up everything for a chance to build something new among the stars. "Admiral," Sarah said one last time, "I'm begging you. Don't do this. We can find another world. We'll leave your space and never return." Vex Tar smiled, showing all his sharp teeth. "Too late, human. You should have stayed on your little planet." The screen went dark for a moment. Then it lit up again, showing the outside of Sarah's ship. She could see the Zephyrian warships arranged in an attack formation. Their weapons glowed brighter and brighter. "All hands, brace for impact," Sarah called over the ship's speakers. She knew their shields wouldn't stop weapons that powerful. She knew 50,000 people were about to die, and there was nothing she could do to save them. The first beam hit their ship like a hammer of light. The Times New Horizon Times shook violently as explosions tore through its hull. Emergency alarms screamed throughout the corridors. The lights flickered and went out in many sections. Sarah was thrown to the floor as another blast hit them. She could hear the ship breaking apart around her. Through the chaos, she could hear people screaming over the communication system. "Hull breaches on decks 5 through 15, Lieutenant Park called out. "Life support failing. We're losing atmosphere fast." Sarah pulled herself up and looked at the screen one more time. Vex Tar was watching with satisfaction as her ship died. His 4 eyes showed no mercy, no regret. To him, this was just another day of conquest. "Emergency message to Earth," Sarah gasped, as another explosion rocked the ship. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them the Zephyrians showed no mercy." The ship's main power failed. The lights went out forever. In the cold vacuum of space, the Times, New Horizon Times, broke into pieces, taking 50,000 dreams with it. Admiral Vex Tar watched the debris scatter. He felt pleased with himself. Another species had learned the price of challenging the hegemony. Soon, their homeworld would receive his message and understand that resistance was hopeless. He had no way of knowing that he had just made the biggest mistake in the history of his empire. He had no idea what kind of species he had just declared war on. He would learn soon enough that some sleeping giants should never be awakened. The message began its long journey to Earth, carrying news that would change everything. The message from the Times New Horizon Times reached Earth 13 days later. In a small room deep underground in Geneva, General Marcus Torres watched the recording for the 5th time. His face showed no emotion, but his hands were clenched into fists. Around the table sat the other members of Earth's War Council. Admiral Liu from the Space Navy, General Petrov from the Ground Forces, Dr. Hassan from Intelligence, Director Webb from Special Operations. These 5 people had the power to decide humanity's response to what had happened. 50,000 civilians, General Torres said quietly, including 8,000 children, murdered without warning by an empire that thinks might makes right. Admiral Liu studied the tactical data. Their technology is advanced, but not impossible to counter. The real problem is their size. Intelligence suggests they control over 200 star systems. "Numbers don't always win wars," Dr. Hassan said. Her voice was cold as ice. "We've been preparing for this day since we first looked up at the stars. The question is, do we respond with limited action or total war?" Director Webb spoke for the first time. They broadcast the execution across subspace. They wanted other human ships to see it. They wanted to terrorize us into submission. He paused. "That was a mistake." General Torres nodded. "They don't understand what they're dealing with. They see our civilian ships and think we're weak. They have no idea what we've built in the shadows." The truth was that Earth had been preparing for alien contact for over a century, but they hadn't prepared to make friends. Human history taught a simple lesson. When 2 civilizations meet, one usually destroys the other. Humans decided long ago that they would not be the ones destroyed. "Recommendation?" General Torres asked. Admiral Liu answered first. "Full mobilization. Omega Protocol. We show them what happens when you murder human children." General Petrov agreed. "The Zephyrians follow the old rules of war. Formal battles. Honor duels. They won't be ready for how we fight." Dr. Hassan pulled up a holographic display showing Zephyrian space. "Their empire is built on fear. They conquer primitive species quickly and brutally. But they've never fought anyone who could fight back effectively." Director Webb smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "They're about to learn the difference between conquering farmers and fighting soldiers." General Torres looked at each of them in turn. These people had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment. Now 50,000 innocent humans were dead, and it was time to show the galaxy what humanity was capable of. "Motion to activate Omega Protocol," General Torres said formally. Seconded, Admiral Liu replied. All in favor? 5 hands raised without hesitation. Omega Protocol is active. Classification: Extinction level threat to human survival. Rules of engagement: Total war. Geneva Convention suspended for non-human combatants. General Torres paused. God help them. Because we won't. Across the solar system, hidden bases came alive. For decades, humans had been building warships in secret. Asteroid mining stations were actually weapons factories. Research outposts were military command centers. Civilian transport ships carried hidden weapons and could transform into fighters within hours. The true human fleet began to emerge from hiding. These were not the slow, peaceful colony ships that aliens had observed. These were warships designed by a species that had perfected the art of killing over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. In a hidden shipyard behind Jupiter's moons, Admiral Sarah Cross watched as her fleet prepared for launch. The ships were black as space itself, covered in stealth technology that made them nearly invisible. Each vessel was loaded with weapons that pushed the boundaries of physics. How many ships are we deploying? Asked Captain Morrison, her second in command. First wave: 300 stealth destroyers, 50 heavy cruisers, 12 carrier groups. Admiral Cross looked at the tactical display. Second wave will follow once we assess their response. Captain Morrison whistled softly. The Zephyrians have no idea what's coming. 4. That's the point. Admiral Cross replied. They think they're fighting the people who built the Times New Horizon asterisk. They don't know about the people who built these ships. On Mars, General Kim watched as his special forces prepared for deployment. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were genetically enhanced warriors trained from childhood in every form of combat ever developed by humans. They could fight in space, on planets, or in ships. They could survive in environments that would kill normal people. First target? Asked Colonel Santos. General Kim pointed to a star map. Zirion Prime, Zephyrian border world with a major military base. We go in quiet, gather intelligence, remove their ability to fight back. Rules of engagement? Eliminate all military targets. Avoid civilian casualties when possible, but mission comes first. General Kim's expression was grim. These aliens think war is a game with rules. We're going to teach them that survival has no rules. In orbit around Earth, the massive communication array began broadcasting on frequencies the Zephyrians would intercept. But the messages were not meant for alien ears. They were coded transmissions to human ships scattered throughout the galaxy. Operation Homecoming is active, the message said. All civilian vessels return to designated safe zones. All military assets prepare for combat deployment. Remember the Times New Horizon asterisk. The phrase, "Remember the Times New Horizon asterisk," spread through human space like wildfire. On mining colonies and research stations, on transport ships and orbital platforms, humans received the message and understood its meaning. The peaceful time was over. Now it was time for war. Back in the command center on Earth, General Torres watched as reports came in from across human space. Military units were moving into position. Weapons were being distributed. Civilian populations were evacuating to safe zones. Estimated time to full deployment? He asked. 72 hours, Admiral Liu replied. The first strike teams are already moving towards Zephyrian space. General Torres nodded. For 3 days, the aliens would think they had terrified humanity into silence. They would celebrate their easy victory over primitive humans. They had no idea that they had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. Send a message to Admiral Vextar, General Torres ordered. What should it say, sir? General Torres thought for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but filled with promise. Congratulations, Admiral. You just declared war on the deadliest species in the galaxy. We hope you're prepared for the consequences. The message began its journey towards Zephyrian space. But by the time it arrived, the war would already have begun. Captain Kethrall, of the Zephyrian Third Fleet, stared at his communication screen with growing confusion. 3 border worlds had gone silent in the past week. No distress calls, no battle reports, just empty space where busy colonies used to be. "Any word from Zirion Prime?" he asked his communications officer. "Nothing, sir. Their last transmission was 6 hours ago." Everything seemed normal. Captain Kethral felt a chill in his blood. Zirion Prime was a fortress world with massive orbital weapons and 50,000 troops. It didn't just go quiet. Set course for Zirion Prime. Maximum speed. His ship, the Times Dominator Asterisk, was one of the most powerful vessels in the Zephyrian fleet. Its weapons could destroy entire cities. Its shields could withstand almost any attack. Captain Kethral had conquered a dozen worlds with this ship. When they reached Zirion Prime, what they found made no sense. The planet was still there. The cities were intact. The civilian population was alive and seemed unharmed. But every military base was gone. Not destroyed. Gone. Removed so completely that it looked like they had never existed. "Scan for the orbital defense platform," Captain Kethral ordered. "Sir, there is no orbital defense platform." "That's impossible. It was the size of a small moon." "I'm reading debris in the asteroid belt, sir. Small pieces scattered across millions of kilometers." Captain Kethral felt fear creeping into his mind. The orbital platform had shields that could stop battleship cannons. What kind of weapon could turn it into tiny pieces? "Take us down to the main base. I want to see what happened." The shuttle landed where the military command center used to be. Now there was just empty ground, as if the entire base had been lifted away. Captain Kethral and his security team walked around the area, looking for clues. A Zephyrian civilian approached them carefully. The alien's eyes were wide with fear. "What happened here?" Captain Kethral demanded. "Shadows," the civilian whispered. "They came in the night, like shadows. We saw nothing, heard nothing. In the morning, all the soldiers were gone. Gone where? We don't know. They left behind equipment and weapons, but no bodies. No signs of battle. The humans just took them." "Humans?" Captain Kethral grabbed the civilian's arm. "You saw humans?" "Not saw. Felt. They were here, but we couldn't see them properly. Like darkness that moved with purpose." Captain Kethral released the civilian and contacted his ship. "Any sign of human vessels in the system?" "Negative, sir. If they were here, we can't detect them now." Back on his ship, Captain Kethral reviewed the security footage from around the planet. What he saw made his blood freeze. Dark shapes moving through military compounds. Like ghosts, soldiers falling unconscious without firing a shot. Weapons and vehicles being loaded onto ships that his sensors couldn't properly track. The humans fought like nothing in Zephyrian experience. They didn't charge in with loud weapons and bright explosions. They slipped in quietly, removed threats surgically, and vanished before anyone knew they were there. "Get me Admiral Vex-Tar," Captain Kethral ordered. When the Admiral's face appeared on screen, Captain Kethral could see he was not in a good mood. "Report," Admiral Vex-Tar snapped. "Sir, we've lost 3 border worlds. The humans are not fighting the way we expected." "Explain." "They're not trying to conquer territory. They're eliminating our military capabilities while leaving civilians alone. It's surgical, precise. They know exactly what to hit and how to do it without being detected." Admiral Vex-Tar's 4 eyes narrowed. "Impossible. Our intelligence showed they have primitive technology." "Sir, I'm looking at footage of human soldiers in armor that bends light around them. Their ships are invisible to our sensors. Their weapons disable our shields like they're made of paper." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "How many humans?" "Unknown. They could be a small strike force or a massive army. We can't detect them until they choose to reveal themselves." "Unknown." Admiral Vex-Tar's expression grew thoughtful. "Perhaps we underestimated them. But numbers will tell in the end. Prepare the main fleet for a decisive battle." "Sir, I don't think you understand. They're not fighting battles. They're hunting us." 3 days later, Admiral Vex-Tar's main fleet moved toward the human home system, expecting to find frightened civilians hiding behind weak defenses. Instead, they found empty space. Where are they? Admiral Vextar demanded. Unknown, sir. Our sensors show no human ships in this system. They must be hiding behind their planet or moons. All ships. Begin orbital bombardment of suspected locations. The Zephyrian fleet opened fire on empty space. Their massive weapons lit up the darkness, but hit nothing except asteroids and empty ships that had been left behind as decoys. Admiral, the sensor officer called out. I'm reading massive energy signatures behind us. Admiral Vextar turned to look at the tactical display. Hundreds of ships were appearing out of nowhere, emerging from stealth, like predators revealing themselves to trapped prey. The human ships were unlike anything in Zephyrian databases. They were sleek, black, and moved with impossible coordination. Their weapons fired beams of energy that cut through Zephyrian shields like they weren't there. Return fire, Admiral Vextar shouted. His ships tried to respond, but the humans were already moving. They struck key targets with devastating precision. Command ships, communication arrays, weapons systems. Within minutes, the mighty Zephyrian fleet was crippled and scattered. Damage report. 60% of the fleet is disabled or destroyed, sir. They're targeting our critical systems with impossible accuracy. Admiral Vextar watched in horror as human ships moved through his formation like dancers, avoiding return fire while destroying everything they touched. These were not the desperate attacks of a primitive species. This was the work of master warriors who had turned killing into an art form. Retreat, he ordered. All ships, retreat to safe distance. The surviving Zephyrian ships tried to escape, but the humans followed them. Not to destroy them all, Admiral Vextar realized, but to study them. The humans were learning how Zephyrian ships moved, how they fought, how they could be defeated. When the humans finally withdrew, they left behind a message broadcast on all Zephyrian frequencies. A human face appeared on every screen in the fleet. It was a woman with cold, determined eyes. Admiral Vextar, she said. I am Admiral Sarah Cross of the Human Space Navy. You murdered 50,000 of our people. Did you think there would be no consequences? Admiral Vextar stared at the screen, unable to speak. This was just the beginning, Admiral Cross continued. We wanted you to understand what you're facing. Your empire has conquered weak species that couldn't fight back. Now you've found one that can. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Vextar alone with his crippled fleet and the terrible realization that he had awakened something that should have been left sleeping. In the distance, barely visible against the stars, the human fleet waited and watched like wolves studying their prey. Admiral Vextar sat in his command center, surrounded by reports of defeat. In 2 weeks, the humans had crippled half his fleet and captured 17 star systems, but they weren't conquering these worlds. They were freeing them. Species that had been slaves to the hegemony for centuries were suddenly independent. The humans would arrive, remove all Zephyrian military forces, and then leave. They didn't try to rule these worlds or take their resources. They just wanted the Zephyrians gone. Sir, his intelligence officer called out, we've intercepted some human military communications. Can we understand them? Partially. But sir, what we've learned is disturbing. The officer activated a holographic display showing translated text from human transmissions. Admiral Vextar read the words with growing horror. Operation Overlord successful. Enemy fortifications eliminated with minimal casualties. Stealth teams have completed psychological operations. Enemy morale collapsing on 12 worlds. Recommend implementing Siege Doctrine Alpha 7. Cut supply lines and wait for surrender. Admiral Vextar looked up from the display. These are just battle reports. What's disturbing about them? Sir, these aren't just battle reports. They're references to something called human military history. Our computers have been analyzing the patterns in their attacks, and we found something in their databases. The display changed to show a timeline stretching back thousands of years. It was filled with wars, battles, and conflicts that made Admiral Vextar's blood run cold. They've been fighting for their entire existence, the intelligence officer continued. Not just small conflicts. Massive wars that covered their whole planet. Wars that lasted decades. Wars where billions died. Admiral Vex's tar studied the timeline. This can't be accurate. No species could survive this much warfare. That's what I thought too. But look at this. The officer highlighted a section of the timeline. This shows something they call the World Wars. Global conflicts that involved every nation on their planet. The display showed pictures of massive battles, destroyed cities, and weapons that could level mountains. Admiral Vex Tar had trouble believing any species could do this to themselves and survive. They developed nuclear weapons and used them against each other. They created gas attacks that could kill thousands. They built machines designed only for killing. The officer's voice was shaking. Sir, their entire civilization is built around war. Show me more. The display shifted to show human military doctrine. Admiral Vex Tar read about concepts that didn't exist in Zephyrian warfare. Psychological operations, guerrilla tactics, total war, scorched earth policies. They don't fight like we do, the officer explained. We have rules. Honor. Formal battles between armies. The humans have no such limitations. They attack supply lines, communication networks, civilian morale. They turn enemies against each other. They make war on every level possible. Admiral Vex Tar felt sick. What about their current military structure? That's the worst part, sir. They don't have one military. They have dozens of specialized branches. Space Marines trained to fight on ships. Stealth commandos, who can infiltrate any target. Cyber warfare specialists, who can destroy enemy computers. Psychological operations units, that can break enemy morale without firing a shot. The display showed organizational charts that made Admiral Vex Tar dizzy. The human military was like a machine with thousands of parts, each designed for a specific type of destruction. And behind it all, the officer continued, they have strategic commanders who coordinate operations across hundreds of star systems simultaneously. Sir, they're treating our entire empire like a single battlefield. Admiral Vex Tar stood up and walked to the large window overlooking space. In the distance, he could see the lights of his remaining fleet. Ships that had once seemed powerful now felt small and vulnerable. What else? They're not just soldiers, sir. Every human receives basic military training. Their entertainment consists of war games and tactical simulations. Their sports are ritualized combat. Even their children play games that teach them military strategy. Admiral Vex Tar turned back to the display. Children? Yes, sir. Human children learn to fight before they learn to read. Not because they're forced to, but because their entire culture celebrates warfare. They have sayings like, if you want peace, prepare for war, and the best defense is a good offense. The Admiral felt something he had never experienced before. True fear. Are you telling me that every human is a potential soldier? Are you telling me that every human is a potential soldier? More than that, sir. Every human is a potential general. They study military history the way we study art. They analyze battles for entertainment. They turn killing into science, and strategy into poetry. Admiral Vex Tar sat down heavily in his command chair. No wonder they adapt so quickly. They're not learning how to fight us. They're applying lessons they've been learning for thousands of years. There's more, sir. We found records of something called military academies. Schools dedicated entirely to the study of warfare. They have universities where the smartest humans spend years learning nothing but how to destroy their enemies more efficiently. The display showed images of human military schools. Young humans studying tactics, weapons, and strategy, with the dedication that Zephyrians reserved for religion. They have philosophers whose only job is to think about war, writers who spend their lives creating stories about combat, scientists who develop new ways to kill. Sir, their entire species is optimized for destruction. Admiral Vex Tar looked at the battle reports from the past weeks with new understanding. The humans weren't just winning. They were playing with the Zephyrian fleet, like a child plays with toys. Get me Emperor Thaxmor. When the Emperor appeared on screen, Admiral Vextar could see the strain in his leader's face. The war was not going well, and everyone knew it. "Report," the Emperor demanded. "Your Majesty, I have urgent intelligence about the humans. We made a terrible mistake." "Explain." Admiral Vextar took a deep breath. "Sire, we didn't attack a peaceful species. We attacked a race of warriors who have spent their entire existence perfecting the art of war. Every human is trained to fight. Their whole civilization is designed around conflict." The Emperor's expression grew dark. "You're saying they're a military species?" "More than that, Your Majesty. They're what happens when evolution spends millions of years creating the perfect predator. We kicked a sleeping monster, and now it's hunting us." The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. "Recommendations? Immediate peace negotiations. Before they decide to stop playing with us and start seriously trying to win." The Emperor's face went pale. "You think they're not trying to win?" Admiral Vextar looked at the tactical displays showing human fleet movements. The patterns were too clean, too precise. The humans were holding back, using only a fraction of their capabilities. "Your Majesty, I think they're studying us. Learning our weaknesses. Testing our responses. When they're ready, they'll end this war in a way that makes our conquest of other species look gentle." The Emperor closed his eyes. "How long before they're ready?" Admiral Vextar watched as another Zephyrian outpost went dark on his tactical display. "I don't think we want to find out." Emperor Thax Mor stood in his throne room, looking out at the capital city of his empire. For 3,000 years, his people had ruled 200 star systems. Now, human ships hung in the sky above his homeworld, like dark angels of judgment. The war had ended not with a great battle, but with a demonstration that made resistance impossible. On the same day, at the same time, human forces had appeared in 47 core systems simultaneously, not to destroy them, but to show that they could. The coordination required for such an operation was beyond Zephyrian understanding. It meant the humans had command and control systems that could manage military operations across thousands of light years in perfect synchronization. "Your Majesty," his aide whispered. "The human commander is here." Emperor Thax Mor turned as the doors to his throne room opened. A human woman walked in, flanked by 2 soldiers in black armor. She moved with confidence, like someone who had never doubted they would reach this moment. "Emperor Thax Mor," she said, stopping in front of his throne. "I am Admiral Rebecca Santos, of the Human Space Navy. We need to discuss terms." The Emperor studied her face. She was younger than he had expected, but her eyes held the weight of absolute authority. Behind her, the 2 soldiers stood perfectly still, but the Emperor could sense the deadly readiness in their posture. "Terms?" the Emperor asked. "Are you not here to execute me?" Admiral Santos tilted her head slightly. "Should I be? Your Admiral Vextar destroyed your colony ship. 50,000 of your people died. By the laws of war, you have the right to demand blood. Admiral Vextar has been arrested and will face trial for war crimes," Admiral Santos replied. "But executing you won't bring back the people on the Times New Horizon asterisk. Besides, dead enemies don't learn lessons." She activated a small device, and a holographic display appeared showing the current state of Zephyrian space. Red markers indicated human forces at every major military installation in the Empire. "Your military has been neutralized," Admiral Santos continued. "Your weapons production facilities have been captured or destroyed. Your communication networks are under our control. The war is over." Emperor Thax Mor looked at the display with growing amazement. "How? How did you coordinate attacks across such distances?" "The same way we coordinate everything," Admiral Santos replied. "Practice. Humans have been fighting wars across multiple continents for thousands of years. Managing operations across star systems is just a larger version of the same problem." The Emperor sat down heavily on his throne. "What do you want?" "The unconditional surrender of the Zephyrian hegemony. Complete disarmament of your military forces. Release of all enslaved species under your control. And cooperation with war crimes investigations." "And if I refuse?" Admiral Santos gestured to the display showing human forces throughout Zephyrian space. You're not in a position to refuse. But let me be clear about something, Emperor. We're not here to destroy your species. We're here to end your empire. She changed the display to show the species that had been freed from Zephyrian control. Hundreds of worlds where enslaved populations were now building their own governments. For 3,000 years, your people have conquered and enslaved others because you believed might makes right. You just learned why that belief is fatal. The Emperor stared at the tactical displays. Your species could exterminate us. Why don't you? Admiral Santos was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm but firm. Because spite isn't strategy, Emperor. We're not keeping you alive out of mercy. We're keeping you alive because dead enemies don't learn lessons. She walked closer to the throne. And we want every species in this galaxy to understand something very clearly. The display changed again, showing the full extent of human military operations over the past months. Hundreds of simultaneous strikes, coordinated across vast distances, all executed with machine-like precision. For 3,000 years, your empire conquered dozens of species because you assumed might makes right. You just learned why that assumption is fatal when applied to humans. Emperor Thaxmore studied the tactical displays with growing understanding. You're not the newest member of the galactic community. No, Admiral Santos confirmed. We are what evolution produces when a single species refuses to let anything dominate it for millions of years. We are what happens when war becomes an art form. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. And you, Emperor, just declared war on the artists. The Emperor looked around his throne room one last time. What happens to my people? They learn to be neighbors instead of conquerors. Your homeworld will be supervised by human advisors until we're satisfied that you understand the new rules. Your military will be rebuilt from the ground up, trained in defensive tactics only. Admiral Santos deactivated the display. Your people will be given the chance to prove they can live peacefully alongside other species. If they succeed, they'll have their independence. If they fail, she didn't need to finish the sentence. The Emperor understood perfectly. I accept your terms, Emperor Thaxmore said formally. Good. Transport ships will arrive tomorrow to begin relocating your military personnel to education facilities. They'll learn about human military history, so they understand exactly what they challenged. Admiral Santos turned to leave, then paused. One more thing, Emperor. In human space, we have memorials to the people who die in wars. I'm building one for the crew of the Times, New Horizon *. 50,000 names carved in stone. With a simple message. What message? They came in peace. They died in peace. They will be remembered in war. Admiral Santos looked back at him. Your Admiral Vextar will attend the dedication ceremony. In chains. 6 months later, the former hegemony space operated under the Terran Protectorate. Species that had been enslaved for centuries worked alongside human advisors to rebuild their civilizations. Trade routes opened between worlds that had never been allowed to communicate. Technology and culture began flowing freely across the galaxy. On Earth, the newly established Galactic War College welcomed its first class of alien military officers. They came to learn how humans thought about conflict, strategy, and survival. The curriculum was simple. Study every human war, understand every human tactic, and learn why humans were so dangerous. The first lesson, taught to every student, was always the same. War is not about strength. War is about adaptation. And some species have had more practice adapting than others. In the former Zephyrian space, Admiral Vextar sat in a prison cell, awaiting his trial for war crimes. Every day, he was required to watch recordings of human military history. He learned about generals who had won battles against impossible odds. He studied tactics that turned weakness into strength and defeat into victory. But most importantly, he learned about the human concept of restraint. Despite their overwhelming capability for destruction, humans chose when to fight and when to show mercy. They could have burned every Zephyrian world to ash. But instead they chose to build something better. On the memorial wall in Geneva, 50,000 names were carved in stone beneath a simple inscription. Remember the Times New Horizon *. The phrase had become more than a battle cry. It was a promise that humanity would never again allow innocents to be murdered without consequences. And throughout